podcast journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Are you a fan of lit RPG like I am? Well, then you will know this best-selling author, Dakota Krout. He is the best-selling author of Divine Dungeons, Completionist Crawlers, Full Murder Hobo series. Dakota Krout was chosen as Audible's top 5 fantasy pick for 2017 and has been the top 5 bestseller on Amazon and top 6 bestseller on Audible. So without any further delay, I would like to welcome Dakota Krout.
Hey, man. How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, brother. I am super excited to chat with you, get all geeky in the areas of lit RPG, and just overall learn a bit about your journey, man, and what
Cool.
you know, all the way up to the Dale Mountain, So, I'd love to just first kick things off, just to kind of get things settled right, and just understand just a little bit about your journey into being an author in the lit RPG space.
Sure. Like any particular question there, or?
Yeah, I mean, just could you describe to me kind of what were you doing before being an author in the space, and then
Sure.
what was your transition into there?
Sure, man. So, I started actually writing back in 2016.
Mhm.
And before that, so I had when I published my first novel, that was Dungeon Born. I had just gotten done with about 8 years in the Army. I was actually in college at the time. I was getting a degree in computer science, and I had been doing that for a long time. So that's kind of what I did in the Army as well. And
Mhm.
so it was a pretty easy transition to civilian sector to just had to then have a degree to do the same kind of work. And so, yeah, I kind of flew through there, and I found myself with a lot of free time. Just 22 credits at a time is what I was doing it at a few different points. And then my senior year, I dropped down to like 6 because it was just like senior project and things that you need to have just before you graduate. And I found myself with, just large chunks of time. And I'm not really good with downtime. Like I'm not good with being bored. I always had to be doing something, right? Like I always want to either be learning or doing or creating or like consuming different media, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I'm also not much for like movies, right? So I like video games and such. So I decided, hey, am I gonna spend my time doing something, or am I gonna spend my time playing around? And so I decided to start writing books. And I actually wrote my first book, never expecting that anyone would read it. Just completely, did the best that I could with the very, very limited budget that I had, and put it out in the world, and it took off like a rocket, and it was awesome. Rockets, not like a rock. Took off like a rocket, and so I jumped on and I started writing as quickly as I could, as quality as I could, and I've just kept that up ever since. And 31 books out on the market right now, I think, since then.
Oh, the ones that you've personally written or that you've been helped to produce?
Oh no, if we're going through like Mountaindale, it was
Yeah.
something like 160-ish. But no, so Dakota Crowd books. Yeah, it's
Wow.
31.
Since
Yeah.
and your first book was in what year again?
So it came out. I want to say it came out October 5th of 2016.
That's incredible. So
Yeah.
31 books since 2016.
Yes.
Oh, that's incredible. And the
And
first
and that's just what's published. Like I
oh,
have other books that I'm waiting on publishing right now. So yeah.
oh yeah. Did any of them that you actually produced go into the waste bin where you're just like, nah, no.
What actually, yes. So I almost said no, but I
Mhm.
had at one point a collaborative work with another really awesome, really famous author who is super cool. And um, what we did is we would travel back and forth because he lives in a different country. Well, it's Canada, but still. And and so we would go to each other's house and stay there for
Mhm.
like a week or two.
Mhm.
Just work on a couple of books real hard. So we got like 2.5 books in on a 4-book series that we had planned, and COVID hit, and so we got couldn't do the thing, and then by the
Yeah.
time travel restrictions were done, we looked back at the work and we're like, we missed the time when this would have been successful. So that's the only reason I would ever throw a book away is um just I miss the market. Like I miss the time that it would have been successful. Um but otherwise I'm not a fan of like writing and throwing something away. I'm gonna write everything I have to the best of my ability every single time. And if I didn't believe in the book, I wouldn't write it. So
Mm,
I'm never gonna just trash something.
mm.
Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily part of. There's a certain magical moment where you're writing and you're in the flow of writing. Was that the reason why you missed the mark? Was it because of the industry, the market, what was going on in the time? Was it internal, external? Why you missed the mark?
A little bit of both.
Mm.
So it was at a time where kind of like Magical Academy was a little bit more popular in the genre.
Mhm.
And so like we missed the market point of that. But we also like kind of the thing that we were doing was it was really more of a chance to get together and chill and hang out.
Uh-huh.
Um, and we wrote each of those books, like the first two books in a month, right? Like first book in a month, second book in another month, and then had like a year and a half between when we could see each other. And it was just like trying to get back into that mindset, trying to get back into that flow, was just too difficult for the both of us. So just let it
Mm.
go. We actually never formally canceled it because this way we told each other that we can tell other people that we are working together just indefinitely. So yeah,
That's cool.
yeah.
There was no conscious uncoupling. You just you guys are still working things out.
Oh no,
Um,
I mean it's a dead project, but we've never formally canceled the work.
sure.
So yeah,
That's cool. That's cool, man.
yeah.
Uh, the first book that you wrote was the Dungeonborn series. Was that the one?
Yeah, the Divine Dungeon. So Dungeonborn.
Woo!
Yep.
Woo! That's a so how I came across you is I had a venture capitalist investor who invests in blockchain and all these other things. Very awesome person, and
DJ.
I had her, well, I had her on the podcast. It was very no, it was, I know she,
Okay, okay. I'm just
we had her on the podcast, and she's like, "Oh my god, she's like," and we're rapping, and she's like, you know, I've had other authors on like Alaron, and she's like, "Oh, it's great, I like his book." She's like, "You know who I really like?" She's like Dakota, and she sent me a
cool.
link to your books, and I just started I went through your whole dungeon book series, and I was like, "Oh my god, I can't stop!" And then I went to the Completionist Chronicles and just started running down the list, and I was like, "Whoa!" And it was an incredible series, and
Thanks, man.
I really love without spoilering the stuff and things with the Dungeonborn series, you do a very cool loop in the entirety of that book series, where the roundabout, the way it kind of starts, the way it kind of ends, and kind of you kind of put all these pieces together as in a very magical it felt complete as a
Thank you.
book. And I'm wondering, what was the inspiration for that? And can you talk to me just a little bit about how you kind of kicked off the designing and the concept around that book, and how you're able to kind of put that so well together?
Sure. So I'm a giant nerd.
Welcome.
So at the time, what I had been doing was back in college, I had a pretty good D&D group, right? So I've always been able to kind of weave a story pretty well,
Mhm.
like kind of keep people engaged, find new and interesting ways to kill off the characters that they were playing, and do it in a way that it still made them laugh, even though they were like, my character's down. And so one of the harsh realities of getting out of college is that your friend group typically does not all work together and then still like even stay in the same town or whatever it
Mm,
is. Schedules get tighter, people have families, yada yada. And so as that group kind of broke up and we started doing other things, um I was like, man, like I have all these great ideas for like when I run people through my next dungeon, here's what I'm going to do. Like, here's the kind of traps I'm going to make. Here's like how I'm going to, wipe the party this time and they'll never see it coming, so on and so forth.
mm,
And then just kind of, I was writing all that down and I'm like, it'd be fun is if I like, threw a few test cases through here. And I was like, what would be cool is if these test cases had backstories. And then and then that just kind of kept going, right? And then so that's my only series where it's like first person view. And it's
Uh-huh.
because I, the dungeon master, I, the dungeon, was putting in my stream of consciousness of how I would do a lot of these different things. And I was using a lot of spreadsheets to track open loops, to track every little item that I used and had any kind of meaning at all, other than like he picked up the gray thing over there, right? If it had a name, if it had a shape, if it had something like that, it always came back up in a way that was important later.
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why people felt like it was a lot more complete is you can go back and find just references to things that are important the entire way through, and it's kind of neat. So, yeah,
It is super neat, and you're talking a bit about Chekhov's gun, right? If it's used in the first act, if it's mentioned
right,
in the first act, it's gonna be used in the third act, and so if there's a
right,
gun mentioned in the beginning, and there was a lot of now was a thing of there's something about that, like, yeah, you're having that come the moment. It's like telling a good joke that everything comes into view at that last second, and that epiphany of like, oh, I mean, even afterwards, I'm like, oh my god, this guy's dope. I want to have him on the podcast, and I go and I look at the name of your publishing house, and I
mhm.
just giggle because I'm just like, you have to know the book, the Dungeon Born series, and actually
Right.
appreciate all of the glory that is in that name. Otherwise, it just seems like a name. And so
Yeah,
I
it's a nice sturdy name for a
it's
publishing
just,
house.
yeah, yeah, it's grounded,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, very, very much so. Really gives you an earthy feel.
Like,
But it also lets you go sky high, which is cool.
yeah, to the top for sure. Yeah, and yeah, but looking at so you really it's this well-rounded things. And you're talking about using spreadsheets, and you're talking about designing these things to where everything has meaning,
Yes.
right? And you're talking about going through and doing these playthrough models where you're say first mentally imagining what happens if I send 5 adventurers through my dungeon. What do they
Mhm,
first try to do? And then the rules of the game about how say the dungeon absorbs things and how you
mhm.
can use certain and there's an economy with essence and all these pieces and all those pieces work together. Can you talk to me just a little bit about your whole process with are you doing outlines and spreadsheets, or are you how are you getting it from here onto a general design to then bring into a book?
Sure. So it's actually one of the things that I feel has been basically instrumental in success in the genre, right?
Mhm,
Um, so talking with authors outside of other genres is always confusing for both of us because the way that they do things and the way that I and we as kind of a genre do things is pretty different. Um, so a lot of the time what they're doing is they're making kind of standalone books where everything wraps up nicely and then there's kind of just like a giant glowing Easter egg that is really hard to miss that
uh-huh,
points back at the previous book, right? And they're like, "Yes, I was this character's son." It's like, "Oh, it's their son. Okay, so this book is a continuation in the series, right?" Um, and with our stuff, it's not, right? Like, it's a lot more Wheel of Time. It's a lot more, like if you look at Brandon Sanderson's Laws of Magic, like
mhm,
um, stuff like that really comes into play with what we do. There's a like magic needs to have an economy. Magic can't just be free. There has to be a cost for things. There has to be a hard magic system that says, hey, here is the rules that you must play by, right?
mhm,
And so the first thing that I do, actually, I just outlined a new system for a book series that I'm planning on writing in 2024. And it's yeah, I know. But when I get those ideas, I gotta put them down and I flesh them out really as thoroughly as I can.
mhm,
Otherwise they linger. So
mhm,
um, one of the first thing that I do is I set the rules, right?
mhm,
Not even like, hey, what the outline of the book is going to be or what the lore of the book. No, it's going to be like, what is the system where if I'm not obeying the rules, I'm not writing in this book anymore, right? Like for instance, like with levels and such, right? You
mhm,
can't just skip a bunch of levels because hand wave, right? You had to fight monsters, you had to, and you can have levels, and then you might have skills and all these other things, and they have to have a really important interplay. And if they don't matter, it changes the genre that you're writing in. You would
Mm,
move from lit RPG to game lit, right?
mhm,
If you can just kind of be like, hey, this just kind of happens. It's more game lit. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a slightly different genre, and so you're going to hit a different, hit those different tropes.
mm.
Um, yes. So with what I do, I'm sorry, cycling back to the question, the actual question.
Sure.
First thing I always do is I build out the magic system
Mhm,
and the hard constraints, right? So this is what it can do, this is what it can't do, here's what it costs to make these things happen, here's how you move through these different levels. Okay. The next thing I do is I set up an outline for the story, right? I say, here are the important moments that need to happen throughout the book, kind of like a really bare bones thing. And then I generate a character. Okay. And the character, a lot of the time, has to be able to interact with, so they had to be able to interact with the system, and they had to be able to interact with that outline. And so, what I do is I generate them based on personality modeling, and I say who is going to fit with this type of system best, and I generate their personality model, and then I use that model to inform the decisions that they make throughout the whole book. And so, if you've ever felt like you're reading through the book and you really connected with a particular character, it's pretty likely that you have the same kind of personality traits as that character, because I'm using actual psychology. Like, I'm using like all the data I have available. I can't say it's correct. I just that's what's available,
mhm,
to make those characters as real as possible.
mhm.
Yeah.
So you okay, so unpacking, rewinding, stepping through the process here a
Sure.
little bit. So what you're talking about is you create the constraints for creativity. And what you're
Sure.
talking about is a hard magic system. Hard
Yes.
magic systems we are using math and number. It's like in a video game, and there's so many
Yes.
points. If all of a sudden I took 3 steps and I did 7 levels, it feels like the game's broken because there's no ability to predict what would happen.
Yes.
And it's our ability to predict based on the hard magic system that then coming up with the novel solutions in
Hmm.
unique ways where you can take an element from the hard magic system and in chapter 3 reapply it and upgrade it in chapter 15, and then
Hmm.
you can make that logical transition along the path. So you make those constraints for the hard magic system, then you say,
Yes.
okay, this is my general outline.
Mhm.
Bob is born.
Right,
Bob.
and the other thing about, hang on about that
Yeah.
system is that it must be understandable and viewable by the reader, right? So
Mm.
they had to understand how we got there. They had to understand why we got there. You're talking about the math of things, and I have people that will reach out to me and correct me to like the thousandth place,
Oh
like
no.
so in
Oh
decimals
no.
on things that I've missed, because people, it really matters to the audience.
Mhm.
So math is, it's an important thing in this genre, very important thing.
Yeah, man, you need like an accountant backpack, carry
Right.
them around on the go. And it just makes sense. And
Mhm,
the somebody that I don't like when you're looking at it, to me, it feels as an avid consumer of this content, it makes it more simple, but it also makes me feel like it's more real. Like I can understand the world better by understanding the hard systems versus, Harry Potter,
mhm.
wave a wand, and he says some sort of thing that he waves, and then all of a sudden it's a magical thing that has you don't really understand. It's a softer magic system. So I like the
Exactly.
edges that you're putting on it. And then so you say constraints for the magic system and everything else around the world, the outline, and then take the character profiles, and you're doing some sort of psychographic systems looking at like the big 5 personalities, maybe the 16 personalities. I don't know if there's
Mhm.
any particular personality profile systems that you're pulling from to be able to look
There
at
is.
this. There is? Okay.
There is.
Do you want to share that, or do you want to keep on to that?
Nah.
No? Okay. All right. That's fair. That's fair, man. It's fascinating to me. But then you take those elements. Okay, so if you take this character and I model and generate him, and then I run him through this outline based upon this hard system, and then
Mhm.
you have those constraints, you have those frames to be able to then weave them through the narrative as you go. You have to go through the system. And do you ever have issues where you get to a certain point and you write yourself into a corner and you've got to go back and rewrite the system, or are you able to have enough elements that you can flow through it?
So typically, so in my main series right now, which
Mhm.
is Completionist Chronicles, um, it was kind of the first time that I really tested this model, right?
Mhm.
And because of that, there were times where just the absolute tracking of things became a real issue because like we would need to use like 3 ounces of like withered root of this plant gathered from this time, right?
Yeah.
And so to get around that, it's a little spoilery, but to get around that, at one point in the book, he gains an entire new specialization where um it's called being a reductionist. So he becomes a reductionist, and
Mhm.
the whole thing is kind of a play on, reductionism, right? Like just I don't want to backtrack all the things that I've done, but I have this other system now that works super duper well. So I'm gonna kind of be reductionist about it and go over here and use this system now instead of that one, right? Um, so what I did was I built that into the book though. Like I didn't go and
Mm.
change the rules. I added basically a subsystem based on his class. And the hard part about doing that is that it's going to make it almost impossible for someone to create this character. Like if I were to open up this universe and let other authors write in it, they're not going to be able to create the same character that I've made, right?
Mhm.
And so that's difficult, but that's okay because my main character should be just my main character, right?
Mhm.
They could go a totally different route of crafter, warrior, mage, anything else, and it's not going to impact the rest of it because that system is still built, right?
Mhm.
So long as they're not trying to do exactly what I did as my main character, who's doing all these crazy things like and breaking this like not breaking the system but like breaking kind of like like there's one point where he literally falls through the world because he's in a video game and the world isn't like they missed that patch and so he fell through, didn't die, and got an achievement for it. Someone else can't get that because they patched it, right?
Mhm.
As they would in a video game, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not like cheating, it's not cheats, it's whatever it is. It's using kind of the things that happen in actual video games to the advantage, right? Um so no, I would not say that I've painted myself in a corner.
Okay.
I've I would have, but the system that I had for that character allowed for this change, right? Like, so it allowed for this class and it has class benefits, but it also has heavy restrictions. In my other series, I have not really painted myself into the corner just because with the Divine Dungeon, nice thing was that it was only a 5 book series. It was fairly short and it was a very easily understandable system,
Mhm.
right? Basically, it's just energy gathering.
Mhm.
You go from having to need the power to do like a static shock to basically having a nuclear reactor in your center, right? And like finding nice, easy, different transition points was a lot easier than it might be otherwise. Sorry, yeah, we can move on there. Sorry, I talked a
No,
lot about.
no, it's great. That was great. I was tracking some of the part of the conversation, and there's a couple pieces that's great. So I mean, you're talking about if you're gonna modify the system, you need to actually introduce an actual modifier into the system, something that actually makes sense that would
Right.
allow you to modify. So, I get, for example, if I do this certain thing, I get double XP, right? And then I can
Right.
modify that. Or if I'm gonna hack the system, I like inside the book series you make it's this fantasy world, but it's
Mhm.
actually a fantasy world inside of a video game, which then you add personalities and overall just kind of the ways certain like so inside there you're talking about the hack in the game. Something happened in the game and
Mhm.
then they patched it, right? And then it's like, well, don't with the AI, and the AI is starting to you're getting on the AI's radar. It's almost like if
Right.
as being a video game developer myself,
Mhm.
if the same cat kept breaking my game and kept exploiting it, right? I do understand
Right.
that there is a part of if there's a bug and you can exploit it, it's more of a feature
Mhm.
until the devs can get around to it. But I like that bit of that cat and mouse relationship that you kind of build out with personifying the AI controller
Mhm.
inside of there and what that's like. Can you talk to me? Was that a where did the personality of that come from? I know you have this computer science background.
Yep.
How did that all kind of bleed together?
Um, Thunder, sorry, big thunderstorm here. So yeah, I mean, kind of the snarkiness comes from being a dev, I would say. I think that it's really hard to find people who are as witty and as snarky and as professional all rolled into one as devs, because like you'll leave stuff in code for like sometimes decades, and people will like only ever see it when they're trying to fix something or connect it to something else, and then they'll find this joke that you put in there potentially decades ago, and they just go, "Ugh, you got me," right? And so kind of the snarkiness comes from that, like, and also seeing if your joke will be seen or understood is one of those other fun things. Um,
Mm,
so there's a lot in my books that people have never found, or at least they've never told me they've found. Um, like some of it is like hex code, some of it is like, there was okay, so funniest thing, right? Probably the funniest thing I ever did,
okay.
in my own head, right? Was I have a chapter in one of my books where every single paragraph starts with the same letter. Okay.
Mm.
And so every single paragraph, doesn't matter how long it is, how short it is, I think it all starts with H. I couldn't tell you why I decided to do that that day, but that's what I decided to do. And for some reason, no one's ever commented on it, right? I'm still waiting for it, and so, like, I have a bunch of those little me like, jokes that are for me that I'm
Mhm.
just, like, over here chuckling about, waiting for
Uh,
someone to catch, right? And
yeah,
so
man.
that's kinda where that personality comes from, is because 'cause I'm just kind of a snarky dude, man, like, um, I write really clean stuff, I write really, funny stuff, but I find ways to sneak stuff in there if you're looking for it. Like, not even like adult humor and kids won't get it. No, like, "Hey, did you know if you line those paragraphs up, it spells my name out? Haha." Stuff like that, and just no one ever comments on it, so I just keep doing it.
Oh, it's okay. Those inside jokes and giggles, man. It's
Important.
super important. I actually last week, literally just last week, I got back from GDC, the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco.
Cool.
So I was just there, and when you're talking about snarky, like inside
Mhm.
joke that just invests so much time into the game. One of them showed me they just recently found in the first Windows build the Easter egg of all of the guys who created, Gabe Newell and all these other cats that actually made
Yep.
the game. And when the devs showed me it, and you're right, they're brilliant and kind, but also that no one's gonna wear a suit. No one's gonna come.
Yep.
Everyone's gonna be just very chill. But there also be
Mhm.
that if you have to invest so much time in this creation, whether it's a book or a video game, that you have to enjoy the process along the way. And sometimes it's just those internal giggles.
Yep.
Um, do you I noticed that, like, in the book too, there are, these some of these jokes and some of these references that are in there that I feel like if I get it in the book, I feel more connected to the character in the book or to the author, because I feel like a bit of your esoteric references inside of there. I feel like, oh, I got it. I know that thing
Yeah.
from the 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you purposely build that in there just
Totally,
to
man.
build the connection? Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, it works both ways. When people reach out and they're like, "Hey, man, I found this Easter egg. Did you mean to do this?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you actually found that?" "Yeah, I totally did." And then, like, I'm like, I know I'm gonna jive with this dude, you know? And that's a whole thing for me, like, like, um, people that get me and I get them, because I know, like, at least they find the same things funny that I find funny, and whatever else it is, like, yeah, I mean, that's how we make friends as adults, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if laugh at the same stuff, cry at the same
No,
stuff.
no.
Uh, d do you have you had an experience where you, became friends with some of your fans, or in a way that you've built relationships with them? Or can you talk to me a little bit about
Sure.
the experience you've had with building connections with your audience?
Absolutely, man. So, I'll use a great reference, and probably my favorite ever experience was, um, I at one point had a fan reach out, and this was back when I was writing Divine Dungeon, and he said, "Hey, your system is broken, and here's why it's broken, and here's here's what you can do to fix it, and here's like the issues I foresee coming, and how it can really impact you if you let it. Like, and so I'm like, "Hey, okay," but I kind of minimalizing that. It was a 15-page summary, right? Like it was hefty, and so I took it, and being a newbie author at the time, I read it, and and I'm like, okay, so this guy, I mean, he's pretty invested in this series. He really cares. Like, this is not like a bashing thing. This is like, hey, he's giving like
Mm.
actionable stuff. I'm like, okay. So I shot him a message. I'm like, hey man, uh, do you want to get on the phone with me and we'll just like chat about this stuff? 10 minutes later, we're on the phone arguing about like Descartes and Nietzsche, and we're going on about why this, like why the Tao Ching, like Tao Ching, whatever thing matters here more than the I Ching or whatever it is. Because it was something that we were both into at the time.
Uh-huh.
Like I was really into like reading philosophy and reading like these different philosophy books, and
Mhm.
trying to understand some of the underpinnings of the universe, because I figured it would help me be a better writer as I build my universes.
Mhm.
And just also because it was fun and we were in college and that's what I was doing. And so yeah, so we're just having this hilarious argument, and I'm like, hey man, like you clearly know enough about this stuff to write a book. Like, just why don't you just write a book? And he's like, nah, I couldn't do that. Well, I finally convinced him to do it. And so I don't know if you know the name Dennis Vanderkerken, but that's how we met.
Oh, no. No,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It's
Yeah,
a
it's
co-author of mine. We have 10 books out together now.
oh, that's awesome. Do you wanna name one of the books just so I can put it on the
Sure.
radar? Uh,
Yeah. So it would be like, I think the first book in the series is, I think it's Axiom. Let's see.
Axiom?
Yeah. Axiom.
Axiom. Axiom
Yeah.
book. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so it's a very different series than what I typically write, because it is more about the underpinnings of the world than it is about, you know, any one particular thing. But
mm,
I can tell you one of the great things, like some of the great reviews that came off of that was and kind of what I learned off of that is, so Dennis has a way of conveying emotion and connecting to a reader that baffles me, right? Like it's very good. It's difficult for me to understand. I'm not super empathetic, like it's just not really a thing. I really care for people, and I care deeply, and I hope they do well, but I don't meet people so much at their place of pain. I just try to find solutions and figure out what we can do, how we can help people, whatever it is. And so he has this way of connecting to the readers that is very different than what I can do alone. And so
mm.
it's like me trying to learn from that has really been beneficial.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's really cool.
It's an amazing that you pushed, inspired a dude to get into the space of actually becoming an author. Then it kind of feels like they're inside the clique of
Hmm.
other authors doing and building and
Yeah.
creating. And then I
Well,
noticed you.
oh, so
Mhm.
I was going to say also all of my employees come from my reader base, from my fan base, people that have been part of my community, part of my whatever it is. Every single one of them started out as a fan and moved up from there.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
yep.
Yeah. Did it is it do you feel like is it sometimes difficult to connect with them because they are such a fan of yours, or is it because I might be a little bit of
Nah,
no, they're down to
no,
earth, yeah.
no.
I
Everyone who knows me knows that I'm just as I'm pretty chill, right? So I don't know if you know this. I have a Discord, and
mm,
I write my books publicly. Like
mhm.
I live stream as I'm writing the book, both myself, like sitting here being all zombie faced as I write and work, and the words themselves as they're showing up on my screen. And so then people can leave comments in real time, chat with me, whatever it is. So
Is okay, so with the Discord group, I didn't know about the live streaming. So you
mhm.
live stream your as you're writing. Is that not doesn't that knock you out of the writing flow if you have so many people commenting on or criticizing or anything? No? You just
No, so I'm really, really, really good at ignoring distractions. I had to be, so with what I did in the military. And so what I do is I set a timer, and for 1 hour it is work time, only work time. Words go down, research goes in, whatever needs to happen, and it's 100% focus. And so at the end of that, I always make sure to give myself a good break, recharge, try and do other stuff. And that's when people are like, "Hey, man, you misspelled this," or "Hey, this would be a cool concept to consider. Like, maybe you want to change this, whatever it is." Or they're just like, "Hi, Dakota." I'm like, "Hi, guys," and then I try and call people up by name and chat with them and see how they're doing, see how their day's going. And because I mean, it matters to me. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's super intimate. To me,
I
it
tried.
feels very vulnerable to like sit there and put words in the page, and you
Eh,
know.
not to me. So I'm of the mindset that if someone doesn't like it, they're not going to be there, right?
Mhm,
No one, no, I've never had anyone come in to like try and troll it, and um, I have a couple of levers in place to help protect against that as well. So, for instance, first off, they have to opt in, right?
mhm,
Like it's not just anyone who pops in a Discord. Like they have to hit the opt in button, and then they get a tag, a Discord tag, so that they can see the channel, right?
mhm,
And so as soon as someone is like doing whatever, like, like taking spoilers and telling them whatever it is. It's only happened once. Um, but as soon as they do that, they're out, right? And they can't reaccess it.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Boo.
I know, right?
Yeah, man. Come on. I'm trying to do my best in this conversation to not give away those points. I'm like, but I also want to talk to you about it as someone who is apparently trying to get my thing to focus here. But as you want to have a connection, you want to share insights, especially
Mhm,
if there's something that I feel like I get that I'm
mhm.
like for example, like, is there a connection? Is there a does let me ask you, is the Completion Chronicles and Dungeon More same universe? Is that the
Yeah,
same universe? Okay.
yeah.
So then A
So,
rolled in
but
okay.
I specifically like so I specifically do not make it the same universe.
Mhm,
Like so, like if I were to like say sell the IP for $3 billion to Disney, to one of them, I've put on nowhere does it say this is this, right? It's just heavily, heavily implied, right? And it's definitely not.
I completely agree.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I was just curious on those ones. And that's the things like those types of moments of like, I'm like, you as a reader or listener, I say
Mhm.
reading, just assume listening for everything I
That's fine.
inject already. So, but as a listener reader, I make those connections and those different moments. It's like I think he just did that, and I was like, am I? And I go back and I start to compare the two, and it's fun because then all of a sudden, like it just explodes with like, oh, aha, and then you can start to bring in, and then I'm wondering, is there anything else as I go through this other series? Like the Completions Chronicles. I think I'm all caught up with the books, but I'm not too sure. I was Bibliomancer, was that the last one or was there
Last one was a book named In Flame. Um,
I believe that
and yeah, so I'm actually writing my books to create one giant pun, just so you know. And I tell people this pun. If would you like to hear the pun?
I would love to hear the pun.
Okay, so the first 5 books in the series are the R series. It's Ritualist, Regicide, Rexus, Raise,
Mhm,
Ruthless. Okay,
mhm,
the second series is the I series. So it's In Flame. I'm working on this. I'm actually 70,000 words into the next book in that series, so that'll be out shortly. Um, and then so there's 3 books in the I series. Well, I'm going to create trilogies in this series from now on until I have. Let me make sure. All right, so it's gonna be the R series ITUAL, right? So that when I finish the final book, I can slap it on the table and shout to my fans, "The ritual is complete."
It's awesome. Maybe that'd be in the center of your room with all the books laying up and things like that.
That's
I
right.
can see that. Nice. That's beautiful. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And you talked about especially with the Completion Chronicles, you have a main character in the book who suffers a certain physical trait. And you talk about diverse personalities that go at it, right? And then and not only say like you have these different personality types, right? So the main character is a certain type of person, and
Mhm.
then in the Ability Masters is a different type of person that
Yep.
have different physical traits, and they're saying that they're at odds with each other. I'm trying to like, hopefully not giving away anything too much here in this, but
I'm not really sure what you're getting at, actually.
um, okay, well then, so
Are you
let's just
saying
say,
Jackson? Like, or
no, not Jackson. So there's a person with no hair, and then this person with hair.
oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. No,
Gotcha.
Jackson's a completely different story, which I think
So
was.
so Baldy versus, flowing locks.
Yeah. Personally, I know what side I'm on.
Right,
Okay.
yeah,
So
right. Same, man. I mean, for at least 8 years of my life, I was a bzzz,
yeah,
so
totally. But did you create those things just to kind of create those different personality types or those physical characteristics so that you feel like
Yeah,
you're on one side or the other? Is because I
yeah.
know that you. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
do that on purpose. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And it's funny because people who read one before they read the other one,
Mhm.
see that person as the hero and the other person as the villain, and that's really what the purpose of it was just to show that a lot of the times it's not who's good and who's bad, it's whose perspective you see, you know?
Mm.
And so that's just one of those things. Like I'm not trying to do any grand social things. I'm just trying to create two different sides of a coin so I can sell shirts and, Team Joe, Team Sam over here,
Yeah. Get your merch. Come get your merch. No,
That's right.
oh, that's great. Now,
Is that Spaceballs?
yes, it is.
Nice.
Yeah,
See?
yeah.
There we go.
Yes.
I know we'll drive.
Baseball the flamethrower. Yes, totes. But that's so glad you picked that up. But that's a part of the thing is like you as a listener, you pick up the personality, you pick up the inside jokes, you pick up these little pieces and you
Mhm.
put them together, and it's so fun to watch. And then you get curious, and I get these emotional investments where I'm like,
Right.
when the charisma goes up for Jackson, right? And you
Mhm.
learn, you learn these different kind of things, and you realize that, oh, someone's not a certain type of person. It's just the characters are being modified. You get happy to see someone's growth inside the storyline, and it's
Mhm.
very interesting. And I like how you create these divides with people, and these growths that bring them together. And so
Thank you.
I'm really fascinated by the way that you do that and the structure on how you create it's, I don't know, compelling character evolutions, I guess.
Sure. Well, thank
Um
you.
yeah.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a couple times about the military, and you talked about having to shave your head, and you talked about how you've been really good at focusing
Yep.
through because of the things you had to endure. Can you just talk to me just a little bit about whatever you feel comfortable sharing with the
What I can.
yeah, yeah. Well, on what gave you, what did you go through a bit in your military experience, and then what did you get out of that you could bring into the whole writing book series stuff?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it is understanding that you need to be able to explain things in a way that is very, very clear and very, very repeatable, right? And that if you can't do that, there's two things that happen. One, there will be people that do it wrong, and two, there will be no way to hold them to account for doing it wrong, right? And so if you can explain it clearly, if it's down on paper, then and they've signed that they understand how to do the job, stuff like that, right?
Mhm,
Um, then you can hold them to account if they do it wrong, right?
mhm,
And that's all there's to it. And so that really had an impact on contracts and how carefully I read contracts and so on and so forth. So in the first Completionist Chronicles book, you may have noticed that he has a massive aversion to contracts
mhm,
and he really really doesn't like them. And well, at that time I was going through I was getting out of the army and I was realizing all of the benefits that I had been promised were just going to vanish because yeah, because that's how the contract was written, right? Even though that's not how it made it seem, that's how the
mm,
contract was written. And
mm,
so that is something that definitely impacted my writing is stuff like that. Other than that, like just being able to do that single-minded focus. I have this great boom mic here, so that I can switch between writing on my keyboard and speaking into it, so I can give my wrist a break, and also so I can like stand up and do stuff. Like I know that I need movement, or else I'm going to be jittery and not able to focus. Um, I know that like I know what my kind of risk factors are in terms of being able to focus long term, and so like long periods of time for a long term.
Mm,
And so I know what I need to do to mitigate all that stuff, right? Like if I don't go and work out, I'm going to not have nearly as productive a day, because I'm going to have way too much energy, and I'm going to want to be moving around, but I can't because it's work time, right? Just stuff like that. And so keeping all that in mind, and kind of understanding not only my body but my mind, and knowing how I work, and how I work most efficiently is pretty key in doing this. And 31 books in like what 5-6 years, like. And I mean, it's not like I'm putting out like 10,000 word novellas, right? I think my longest book is like 130,000 words, which comes out to
mm,
about 490 pages. And even my shortest one, the side story that was just kind of a one-off kind of fun thing for me,
mm.
Rexus,
Yeah.
was still 60,000 words, right? Which is, like a novel is
Yeah.
considered at 40,000 words. And so like just one of those things where I need long-term everything, right? And
Mhm,
so I need to make sure to be taking care of myself, need to make sure that I am doing things properly. And so
mm,
that's something that the military helped me understand was, if you're being lazy or whatever it is, there's a reason for it, right? If you're procrastinating, there's a reason for it. So what is that reason? Knock it out, get to work, right?
mm.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So then what it did, yeah, it taught you how to get in gear. It taught you how to focus,
Mhm.
and then also taught you how to pay attention to how you operate optimally, and to make
Yes.
sure you need to do the things you need to do, so that when work time hits, you're not struggle bussing going through a
Man,
situation.
I
Yeah.
need you around to, like, summarize the things I say, because, like, you, like, really cut to the heart of the matter super well. I'm over here, like, being all circumlocucious,
I
right? Or
know,
look, and
man.
I'm like, "Hey, here's what I'm trying to say and
I,
why I'm trying to say it, and yada, yada," and you're like, "Here's the facts." I'm like, "Dang it, I
I
wanna be able to do that."
I think I was a parrot in a past life, you know?
Nice.
I'm pretty good at this. Well, I'm just trying to understand, man. It's very fascinating. One is just
Sure.
as someone who's a big fan of your book series, and just it's just I'm fascinated. Like, how did you make this? How did you get created? How did you get started with this? And then part of the thing is also like with you being a game developer, the background computer science, and then you're bringing it
Mhm.
into the art space. I have deep interests and desires
Sure.
to live the fantasy of the things that you create, and bring those things into like a game world at some point, because like I think there is like that fantasy to the Dungeon-born series, to be the dungeon where you can actually do it,
Right.
because it was D&D was the original like mental VR game that people
Yeah.
were both living a mental narrative playing it. You brought that into the literary world, and I think translating those things into into the game space at some point, to me is like is where we ideally digitize us, put us into the matrix, bring us
Right.
into your game, hopefully not have it be a horrific experience, where the AI controller takes over, per usual. Do you ever see yourself, bringing your book series into the video game genres, or any of the other, in any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if I had an offer on the table, then probably.
Okay.
But I'm a there's a really interesting graphic called, I'm trying to remember exactly where I saw it for the very first time. I think it was in the E-Myth, so the E-Myth Revisited.
Mhm,
So if you're on Google and you type in the survival trap business, like it, because otherwise they
mhm,
give you like how to trap things in the wild. But if you put in like the survival trap for business, um, you see that there is a couple of different major points, right? Typically, when we're doing anything, right, we're at point A. It's
mhm,
also known as the crisis point, right? And the crisis point is where you are trying to determine if you are going to do the one thing that is going to earn you the most amount of revenue over time, the best return on your investment, or if you are going to do these other things because it makes sense for you to do them, and perhaps it might be expensive if you don't do them yourself, right? Or you just need you think you want to do something like a good example of this is an author who is writing a book. Okay, so they've written a book, they've put it out, so they went from A along the path to point B. Point B is they have generated income, and now they're able to make a living, right? So going from point A to point B, they know is writing a book and putting it out, right? That is going to generate them the most amount of income. Well, that takes a while, right? Going from point A to point B takes quite a while if you're writing a book. And so sometimes, actually a lot of the time, especially as a publishing house, right, I get authors who say, "Hey, I've written my book and I want to see it in audio, but I don't want to pay for an audio narrator. So I'm going to narrate my own book." Happens, I would say 60% of the time, right? Like they're just like, I think I'm going to do this. And the reality is there's a reason that's a full-time job that someone else has, right? Because narrating your own book is not just narrating your book, it's sound engineer, it's quality assurance, it's like making sure that you've done the proofing on it correctly. It's an entire skill set and a job, right? And so, but a lot of people don't understand that. They just think, hey, I just need a nice microphone and I'll say those words and people will want to hear it even more because it's me, the author. Well, what if you don't really have that same kind of amazing voice like Dylan Watkins, right? What if you have a Dakota Krout voice and it's like, yes,
Go on.
yes. So the reality is, so people think that it's going to be cheaper for them. Like it's going to save them money. It's going to do better for them to go and do these other things to boost their success instead of driving on from point A to point B. Here's the thing that I know for sure is getting me success. Why would you not double down on the thing that is making you successful? Why would you instead take a hard left turn and choose a whole new career path? And so that's kind of how I feel about, back to your point of, is this going to be a video game? Yeah, but I'm sure as heck ain't going to program it. I'm going to hand them books for research. I'm not going to, like I have a wiki, right? I'll send them toward the wiki that someone else is building because my time is spent writing books 8 to 10 hours a day, even now, right? And so I don't have time for that other stuff because I'm doubling down on what I know is making me successful and hopefully will make me more successful over time. And my success helps other people, which is great. Like I am able to, like, I think with my company, we employ something like 150 people in total between artists and narrators and sound engineers, typesetters, authors, editors, developmental editors, copy editors, line editors, foreign translation. Like all of this stuff is a job for like so many people because like for myself, I'm doing what makes me successful. So are they, and they're better at that than I am over there, right? So I let them do it. So why doesn't everyone? Is the real question.
I love it. So what you're basically talking about is like, hey, what is the thing that you are uniquely, especially good at that actually produces the most value, right?
Not
Versus,
only, yeah. I mean, there's the whole triangle of meaning, right? Does what you do have meaning to you? Do you enjoy doing it, and can you get paid for it? Right? Those three things really have to come together for you to have a career that you want to be in for a very long period of time, right? And so that's where I am right now. Like I really enjoy what I do. It brings me a lot of meaning. It lets me help other people, which is super cool, and it pays, right? And then I can pay those other people. So
yeah. You find out what are the necessary parts of your business that you hate, and then offload that as quickly as possible so that
right.
you can focus on what you enjoy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there's always someone who enjoys other things, man. Like I'm like, hey, I don't like doing research on my own books and trying to like pull stuff out. Someone out there is like, I love that. And I'm like, cool. Would you like to be paid for it? Yes, I would.
Yes.
Have at it.
Hence
Right.
it's- yeah. You see, they're already interested. That makes sense why you have all of your fans, not all of your fans, or all of your employees that came from being fans because they were
Yeah.
naturally just,
Yeah. And they
into
have
this.
wildly differing skill sets as well. Like you mentioned, like you had a friend who does like blockchain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like that's a skill set I don't have, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Well, it's also weird to me because it's such it's a weird thing for me when I have people on the podcast that have nothing to do with lit RPG, and they're like, "Man, you had that guy on. I'm really into that kind of books." I'm like, "But you're why are you? I don't understand." But like, there's this like, there's this, but we're all very passionate about
Yeah.
this subgenre. And I feel like it's growing into a thing, and it's all of a sudden I do feel like we're friends now. We're
Yeah.
friends. I know what you're into, and then we have this little inside, and then we
Mhm.
trade books like Pokemon cards,
There you go. As you
know?
should.
Yes,
I've
it's
got
very
I've
cool.
got some rare shiny covers,
Yeah.
like,
Ooh.
yeah, I've got covers that are out of print by something like 4 years right here on my table, right?
Oh.
My black and white hand drawn covers, right? These are gone, right? Those
Oh,
don't exist
man.
anymore, right? You can't buy them
Oh.
anywhere except from people that already have them.
And that, I mean, that's the thing that makes it so awesome, especially when you have like in a connection to the author, the series, the people, right? And you actually have something that's super hard to get, and that's when it's a lot of meaning
Mhm,
inside of there. So that's amazing. Uh, Looking at it for yourself, right? You really, one of the things that you've done that most authors don't do is you've actually created a community of other authors that you're helping lift up into the genre and creating this ecosystem.
mhm.
And could you talk to me about kind of what's the intentions, what's the motivations, what's the
Sure, man.
benefits for that? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, um, realistically, it's kind of the all right. So, I've already mentioned once my aversion to contracts here, right? I
Mm,
use contracts for everything, right? But the contracts that I put out, I are very easy to read and to understand, and you can ask any of my authors, which every single time before I ever have someone sign a contract, I say, hey, have you had someone go over this with you? Do you understand everything? Do you have any questions? I would be happy to go over this line by line so that you understand everything that you're signing, right?
awesome.
And so with all of that, like, kind of my intent on all this was to give people the helping hand that I wish I would have had when I was getting started. Um, I work n- almost exclusively with brand new authors, right?
Mhm,
So, almost every author in my company, not all of them, but almost all of them, um, started with me and had never published anywhere else before, right?
mhm,
And the contracts that we give them are in any other place would be considered just absolute sweetheart deals, right? And because the purpose of them is not to, you know, make as much money off them as possible. It's to get them to to not self publish, but to get them to full time author as quickly as possible. Like replace their income, increase their quality of life, make their lives better, and let them do what they want to do. And one of the great things about this company is I don't need their money, right? And so we can give out way better deals than I see anywhere else in the industry because we manage our money well and we have great resources. And you could ask any of my authors, I have SOPs for almost everything, right? So like if they have a question on how to do something or
yeah,
why we do it this way, here's why, and here's the
mm,
research that we've done to back it up, and this is yada yada, right? So they can walk in, get a good understanding, and then go and self-publish or go and accept another deal, knowing what it takes to do that stuff, right?
yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I mean, it's just good stuff all the way down.
That's incredible. And what's amazing about it is that when you do that and you create that kind of goodwill in terms of helping, you had the pain of getting screwed over by contracts, and
Mhm,
so you want to help other people along the path avoid the pain of getting screwed over by
exactly.
contracts. And along the way, you're helping these authors, grow and develop their skills and becoming full-time authors faster, which
Right.
I'm sure also you by helping some of these people, I've noticed in the space, because I've helped a lot of people in what I've done in the areas of entrepreneurship, video games, and blah blah blah, is that you also, it feels good to help them, but then it also sounds like you learn from the other gentleman a unique way to connect with the characters and those things out. So while you're helping them, they're also kind of helping you see things from multiple different angles, multiple different perspectives, which is really
A
cool.
true master is an eternal student. Yes.
I know. Oh man, I'm getting a little Avatar style going on there.
Oh yeah, man. Uncle Iroh's that's my jam.
Woo! Yeah, he's so amazing, man.
Yeah, we'll next time we meet each other, or when we meet each other in person, we'll have a nice hot cup of jasmine tea.
A jasmine tea at the White
Yes.
Lotus. Yes. Absolutely. And let me ask you a question in terms of the helping these new authors, building up this publishing house, the
Sure.
31, soon to be 300 books in the next 10 months, all this stuff
Oh.
right now. I know, right? All the listeners like, yes, do it.
Drown the world in ink.
A mountain of books.
Hey.
But what's the holy grail for you? Like, what's your flag in the sand, flag at the top of the, Mountaindale? What is that for you? What do you hope to achieve?
In terms of like what I like my personal goals, or what I hope to achieve with Mountaindale?
Mountaindale, with all the effort, with all these books, with the prolific amount of content that you create, with helping all these authors, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, man. The goal is all of the authors leave my publishing house and do this and have successful careers. That's the end goal, right? If every single author I take on goes on and has an amazing career as an author, or whatever it is that they decide to do in life, but like they go out there and they are better off for having worked with me, right? And then the flag in the sand, man, is them off in the distance somewhere else, pointing back and saying, here's where I got my start, and it's because they helped me and did not screw me over, didn't take liberties with my contracts, didn't make me sign a crap deal, that I was able to achieve this, right? And that's it gives me shivers, man. It's like, oh yeah, just pointing back there, I'm not after whatever I can get. I'm after making sure that, because I'm doing well. I really enjoy what I do. I love writing, and I'm going to continue doing it for as long as I physically and mentally can. And so I don't need to do that stuff with Mountaindale. I don't actually. I've been told by my financial advisor several times that I would be much better off to leave it behind, right? But the fact of the matter is, I want to be there. I wish someone would have been there for me, right? And so that's what I'm after. That's that flag in the sand for me. Is I have no other authors working under my company. They've all left because they have found fabulous success and wealth and whatever it is elsewhere, right?
That's beautiful. I mean, you did the feeling, the impact that you did good, and that you helped these fledgling authors, become glorious birds to fly away. That's
I like crows.
Yeah, I have a murder of them flying around.
Yeah. Murder hobo of them.
A new power just came out.
Yep.
So this okay, so if that is the holy grail, flag in the sand, a flock of murderous hobos, what is the dragon? What is the thing that might be too big to overcome, that you don't know if you can do it, or you don't know if you can evolve past it?
Oh, it's I don't know. That's an interesting one, man, because I've found that there's very little that can't be done just by grinding it away with the sands of time, right? And no matter how long it takes, I think that humanity as a whole, can achieve anything, right? And so that goes for myself as well. I'm human, right? And cue licking eyeball here. And things that I can't get past, I don't know, man. Probably the biggest one of them is competency, right?
Mhm.
So I can't force other people to be successful. I can do the best that I can on their behalf. Um,
Mm.
but there's only so much like I can train someone. There's only so much I can like hold someone's hand before it's like, okay, I'm letting go now. Are you gonna splatter on the pavement or are you gonna fly? Right. And um sometimes it's just the audience didn't like it, but we'll like, hey, like, whatever it is, if it's staff, if it's authors, if it's whatever it is, like all I can do is train people the best that I can and hope for the best on their behalf. I can't guarantee their success. I
Mm.
can't guarantee that they're gonna like I can't even guarantee that they're gonna have a positive opinion of me. I'm just gonna do the very best I can every single day to try and make that happen. And
Mm.
even so, there's people that will be unhappy with how things turn out, right?
Yeah.
So, Dragon is, I guess, for me, it's other people and how they view our interactions. So, yeah.
Mm. That's very cool. I mean, so what you're talking about is the fact that you can't, what one of the things I like that you just said there is that very little can't be done with grinding it away with the sands of time.
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's a really powerful thing because you're talking about the I've never heard that statement. I like it.
I just
And
came up with it there.
so
So,
it's
like,
a trademark.
nah,
um,
feel free to use it. It's cool.
no, it might be the title of this podcast, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
but what I like about it is the yeah, you're talking because you focus and effort and the willingness to block out everything else and focus on your number one,
Mhm.
value maximization thing and going, okay, I'm gonna do this thing. I'm gonna grind it out. I'm gonna focus. I'm gonna pay attention. I'm just gonna keep on it again and again and again, and then just go through that pattern. Because I think not a lot of people are able to block out the distractions, stay
Mhm.
focused on what they do, be consistent, and then have that sort of, methodical, um, I would say focused work to where you say, okay, I'm gonna make sure that everything's mapped out. Some people just they sprint into the woods, get
Right.
scared after 2 minutes, and turn around and run back to the woods screaming,
Mhm.
right? Versus you kind of lay a plan and move through it.
Or they just look at the woods and they say, "Man, that looks scary. I'm gonna stay on the path." You know?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's easier said than done, but I appreciate the way you said it.
Oh, thanks,
Uh,
man.
Yeah, and with that being said, it's been an honor and pleasure to have you on the show here.
Hey, dude,
It
thanks for having us or
it's been
me. The royal
we've
lost.
had this together. We've had this together. Is is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you or the books that you create?
Um, I yeah, I don't know, man. Like, if you give me a cue, I can talk on something for hours. But if you're just like, hey, what's something that everyone should know? Oh man, who my mind is a scary place. I've got all sorts of quippy things that I can throw out there for them. But enjoy puns because they are intended. Maybe I don't know.
Enjoy
Um,
puns. All right, all right. We'll put a
intend your puns.
punctuation on that. Yeah, I love it. Love it. And if people want to find your books, if people want to
Sure.
find out where they are, where do they go for that?
Sure. So I have a lovely site. It's mountaindalepress.com. Super easy. Or you can always type in just dakotacrout.com and it'll bring you to Mountaindale Press because that's how it goes. I bought that
That's how
site
it
too.
works.
Um, and yeah, go to mountaindalepress.com. You can find us there. We can direct you however you want to go to my stuff, to anyone in Mountaindale, which is really cool because if you're in the Mountaindale ecosystem, all your also bots and stuff like that will show up as similar like other authors in my own company. Like we intentionally do that so that we
Mm,
can boost everyone in my company by having them read whatever. um and you can find me on like if you like my book so much you just want more of it, you can find me at patron, so like patron.com/dakota.kraut. Pretty easy. There's
mhm.
yeah. I have books up there that have never yet seen the light of day. Um, Sometimes at one point, I think I had 3 books up on there that were not yet published. So that was fun.
Damn.
Um, and that happens fairly frequently. Um, Otherwise, Instagram, Twitter, definitely Facebook, facebook.com/the Divine Dungeon, or just type in Dakota Kraut. and I'll show up. But yeah, man. Otherwise, the first like 3 pages of Google, anywhere you want to go. Yeah.
Beautiful. Dakota, absolutely. This has been a pleasure. It's been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate all of the grindy focus, content that you're constantly putting out, dude. I very much appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And it's been a pleasure. Have a
Dylan,
blessed
it's been
day.
wonderful, and thank you so much, and thanks again for the invite.
Absolutely, brother. I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.